All right, we are coming up on 8 o'clock. So, let's settle in, get comfortable, grab a drink, grab a book, grab a cat. We all know they're around. And let's get started. Welcome back. This is our second night reading from Agatha Christie's The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. We've met the characters, the cast is assembled, but the titular man is dead. So, now comes the fun part. We need to find out who did it, how, why. There's so many different motivations for what seems to be a perfectly benign gentleman of the town to have been taken out. So, let's see if anyone can get to the bottom of this, whether there will be a mysterious sleuth to step in and guide things to its proper conclusion. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. All right, so let's jump right back into it. So we've got a fair bit of book left, and this one is plenty fun. So, we should begin tonight with Chapter 6 of The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, The Tunisian Dagger. Yeah, that's... It gets me every time. It's such a uniquely spelled name that it triggers connections in my mind. So I do the same thing. Alright. I met the inspector just coming from the door which led into the kitchen quarters. "How's the young lady, Doctor?" "Coming round nicely. Her mother's with her." "That's good. I've been questioning the servants. They all declare that no one has been to the back door tonight. Your description of that stranger was rather vague. Can't you give us something more definite to go upon?" "I'm afraid not," I said regretfully. "It was a dark night, you see, and the fellow had his coat collar well pulled up and his hat squashed down over his eyes." "Huh," said the inspector. "Looked as though he wanted to conceal his face. Sure, it was no one you know?" I replied in the negative, but not as decidedly as I might have done. I remembered my impression that the stranger's voice was not unfamiliar to me. I explained this rather haltingly to the inspector. "It was a rough, uneducated voice, you say?" I agreed, but it occurred to me that the roughness had been of an almost exaggerated quality. If, as the inspector thought, the man had wished to hide his face, he might equally well have tried to disguise his voice. "Do you mind coming into the study with me again, Doctor? There are one or two things I want to ask you." I acquiesced. Inspector Davis unlocked the door of the lobby. We passed through, and he locked the door again behind him. "We don't want to be disturbed," he said grimly. "And we don't want any eavesdropping either. What's all this about blackmail?" "Blackmail?" I exclaimed, very much startled. "Is it an effort of Parker's imagination, or is there something in it?" "If Parker heard anything about blackmail," I said slowly, "he must have been listening outside this door with his ear glued against the keyhole." Davis nodded. "Nothing more likely, you see. I've been Nothing more likely, you see. I've been instituting a few inquiries as to what Parker has been doing with himself this evening. To tell the truth, I don't like his manner. The man knows something. When I began to question him, he got the wind up and plumped out some garbled story of blackmail." I took an instant decision. "I'm rather glad you've brought the matter up," I said. "I've been trying to decide whether to make a clean breast of things or not. I'd already practically decided to tell you everything, but I was going to wait for a favorable opportunity. You might as well have it now." And then, and there, I narrated the whole events of the evening, as I have set them down here. The inspector listened keenly, occasionally interjecting a question. "Most extraordinary story I have ever heard," he said, when I had finished. And you say that letter has completely disappeared? It looks bad. It looks very bad indeed. It gives us what we've been looking for, a motive for the murder. I nodded. I realized that. You say that Mr. Ackroyd hinted at a suspicion he had that some member of his household was involved? Household's rather an elastic term. You don't think that Parker himself might be the man we're after? I suggested. It looks very like it. He was obviously listening at the door when you came out. Then Miss Ackroyd came across him later, bent on entering the study. Say he tried again, when she was safely out of the way. He stabbed Ackroyd, locked the door on the inside, opened the window and got out that way, and went round to a side door, which he had previously left open. How's that? There's only one thing against it, I said slowly. If Ackroyd went on reading that letter as soon as I left, as he intended to do, I don't see him continuing to sit on here and turn things over in his mind for another hour. He'd have had Parker in at once, accused him then and there. And there would have been a fine old uproar. Remember, Ackroyd was a man of choleric temper. Mightn't have had time to go on with the letter just then, suggested the inspector. We know someone was with him at 9:30. If that visitor turned up as soon as you left, and after he went, Miss Ackroyd came in to say good night, well, he wouldn't have been able to go on with the letter until close upon 10 o'clock. And the telephone call? Parker sent that all right. Perhaps before he thought of the locked door and open window. Then he changed his mind, or got in a panic, and decided to deny all knowledge of it. That was it. Depend upon it. Yes, I said rather doubtfully. Anyway, we can find out the truth about the telephone call from the exchange. If it was put through from here, I don't see how anyone else but Parker could have sent it. Depend upon it, he's our man. But keep it dark. We don't want to alarm him just yet, till we've got all the evidence. I'll see to it that he doesn't give us the slip. To all appearances, we'll be concentrating on your mysterious stranger. He rose from where he had been sitting astride the chair belonging to the desk, and crossed over to the still form in the armchair. The weapon ought to give us a clue, he remarked, looking up. It's something quite unique, a curio, I should think, by the look of it. He bent down, surveying the handle attentively, and I heard him give a grunt of satisfaction. Then, very gingerly, he pressed his hands down below the hilt and drew the blade out from the wound. Still carrying it so as not to touch the handle, he placed it in a wide china mug, which adorned the mantelpiece. Yes, he said, nodding at it. Quite a work of art. There can't be many of them about. It was indeed a beautiful object, a narrow, tapering blade, and a hilt of elaborately intertwined metals of curious and careful workmanship. He touched the blade gingerly with his finger, testing its sharpness, and made an appreciative grimace. Lord, what an edge! He exclaimed. A child could drive that into a man, as easy as cutting butter. A dangerous sort of toy to have about. May I examine the body properly now? I asked. He nodded. Go ahead. I made a thorough examination. Well, said the inspector when I had finished. I'll spare you the technical language, I said. We'll keep that for the inquest. The blow was delivered by a right-handed man, standing behind him, and death must have been instantaneous. By the expression on the dead man's face, I should say that the blow was quite unexpected. He probably died without knowing who his assailant was. Butlers can creep about as soft-footed as cats, said Inspector Davis. There's nothing going to be much mystery about this crime. Take a look at the hilt of that dagger. I took the look. I dare say they're not apparent to you, but I can see them clearly enough. He lowered his voice. Fingerprints. He stood off a few steps to judge of his effect. Yes, I said mildly. I guessed that. I do not see why I should be supposed to be totally devoid of intelligence. After all, I read detective stories, and the newspapers, and am a man of quite average ability. If there had been toe marks on the dagger handle, now that would have been quite a different thing. I would then have registered any amount of surprise and awe. I think the inspector was annoyed with me for declining to get thrilled. He picked up the china mug and invited me to accompany him to the billiard room. I want to see if Mr. Raymond can tell us anything about this dagger, he explained. Locking the outer door behind us again, we made our way to the billiard room, where we found Geoffrey Raymond. The inspector held up his exhibit. Ever seen this before, Mr. Raymond? Why, I believe, I'm almost sure that's a curio given to Mr. Ackroyd by Major Blunt. It comes from Morocco, no, Tunis. The crime was committed with that? What an extraordinary thing! It seems almost impossible. And yet, there could hardly be two daggers the same. May I fetch Major Blunt? Without waiting for an answer, he hurried off. Nice young fellow, that, said the inspector. Something honest and ingenious about him. I agreed. In the 2 years that Geoffrey Raymond had been the secretary to Ackroyd, I have never seen him ruffled or out of temper. And he has been, I know, a most efficient secretary. In a minute or two, Raymond returned, accompanied by Blunt. I was right, said Raymond excitedly. It is the Tunisian dagger. Major Blunt hasn't looked at it yet, objected the inspector. I saw it the moment I came into the study, said the quiet man. You recognized it then? Blunt nodded. You said nothing about it, said the inspector suspiciously. Wrong moment, said Blunt. A lot of harm done by blurting out things at the wrong time. He returned the inspector's stare placidly enough. The latter grunted at last and turned away. He brought the dagger over to Blunt. You are quite sure about it, sir? You identify it positively? Absolutely. No doubt whatever. Where was this, curio usually kept? Can you tell me that, sir? It was the secretary who answered. In the silver table in the drawing room. What? I exclaimed. The others looked at me. Yes, doctor? It's nothing. Yes, doctor? Said the inspector again, still more encouragingly. It's so trivial, I explained apologetically, only that when I arrived late last night for dinner, I heard the lid of the silver table being shut down in the drawing room. I saw profound skepticism and a trace of suspicion on the inspector's countenance. How did you know it was the silver table lid? I was forced to explain in detail. A long, tedious explanation which I would infinitely rather not have had to make. The inspector heard me to the end. Was the dagger in its place when you were looking over the contents? He asked. I don't know, I said. I can't say I remember noticing it, but of course it may have been there all the time. We'd better get a hold of the housekeeper, remarked the inspector, and pulled the bell. A few minutes later, Miss Russell, summoned by Parker, entered the room. I don't think I went near the silver table, she said, when the inspector had posed his questions. I was looking to see that all the flowers were fresh. Oh, yes, I remember now. The silver table was open, which it had no business to be, and I shut the lid down as I passed. She looked at him aggressively. I see, said the inspector. Can you tell me if this dagger was in its place then? Miss Russell looked at the weapon composedly. I can't say, I'm sure, she replied. I didn't stop to look. I knew the family would be down any minute, and I wanted to get away. Thank you, said the inspector. There was just a trace of hesitation in his manner, as though he would have liked to question her further, but Miss Russell clearly accepted the words as a dismissal and glided from the room. Rather a Tartar, I should fancy, eh? said the inspector, looking after her. "Let me see. This silver table is in front of one of the windows, I think you said, Doctor?" Raymond answered for me. "Yes, the left-hand window." "And the window was open?" "They were both ajar." "Well, I don't think we need to go into the question much further. Somebody, I'll just say somebody, could get that dagger any time he liked. And exactly when he got it doesn't matter in the least. I'll be coming up in the morning with the chief constable, Mr. Raymond. Until then, I'll keep the key of that door. I want Colonel Melrose to see everything exactly as it is. I happen to know that he's dining out the other side of the country, and I believe staying the night." We watched the inspector take up the jar. I shall have to pack this carefully," he observed. "It's going to be an important piece of evidence in more ways than one." A few minutes later, as I came out of the billiard room with Raymond, the latter gave a low chuckle of amusement. I felt the pressure of his hand on my arm and followed the direction of his eyes. Inspector Davis seemed to be inviting Parker's opinion of a small pocket diary. "A little obvious," murmured my companion. "So Parker is the suspect, is he? Shall we oblige Inspector Davis with a set of our fingerprints also?" He took 2 cards from the card tray, wiped them with his silk handkerchief, then handed one to me and took the other himself. Then, with a grin, he handed them to the police inspector. "Souvenirs," he said. "Number 1, Dr. Shepard. Number 2, my humble self. One from Major Blunt will be forthcoming in the morning." Youth is very buoyant. Even the brutal murder of his friend and employer could not dim Geoffrey Raymond's spirits for long. Perhaps that is as it should be. I do not know. I have lost the quality of resilience long since myself. It was very late when I got back, and I hoped that Caroline would have gone to bed. I might have known better. She had hot cocoa waiting for me, and whilst I drank it, she extracted the whole history of the evening from me. I said nothing of the blackmailing business, but contented myself with giving her the facts of the murder. "The police suspect Parker," I said, as I rose to my feet and prepared to ascend to bed. "There seems a fairly clear case against him." "Parker?" said my sister. "Fiddlesticks! That inspector must be a perfect fool. Parker, indeed! Don't tell me!" With which obscure pronouncement, we went up to bed. And that brings us to the end of chapter 6. And when they accused the butler first, that is the very first indication that the butler did in fact not do it. Just saying. You can't go the always route very first. It just doesn't work. Doesn't work that way. But the secretary is a little suspicious, huh? But also the head maid, able to come and go and close the silver table and full access to everything. So many wonderfully terrible options. Alright, let's continue now with chapter 7. See if any more of this tangled weave will unravel. Oh, yeah, it could be the reddest of red herrings. Alright, chapter 7. I learn my neighbor's profession. On the following morning, I hurried unforgivably over my round. My excuse can be that I had no very serious cases to attend. On my return, Caroline came into the hall to greet me. "Flora Ackroyd is here," she announced in an excited whisper. "What?" I concealed my surprise as best I could. "She's very anxious to see you. She's been here half an hour." Caroline led the way into our small sitting room, and I followed. Flora was sitting on the sofa by the window. She was in black, and she sat nervously twisting her hands together. I was shocked by the sight of her face. All the color had faded away from it. But when she spoke, her manner was as composed and resolute as possible. Dr. Shepherd, I have come to ask you to help me. Of course he'll help you, my dear, said Caroline. I don't think Flora really wished Caroline to be present at the interview. She would, I am sure, have infinitely preferred to speak to me privately, but she also wanted to waste no time, so she made the best of it. I want you to come to the Larches with me. The Larches? I queried, surprised. To see that funny little man? Exclaimed Caroline. Yes, you know who he is, don't you? We fancied, I said, that he might be a retired hairdresser. Flora's blue eyes opened very wide. Why, he's Hercule Poirot. You know who I mean, the private detective. They say he's done the most wonderful things, just like the detectives do in books. A year ago, he retired and came to live down here. Uncle knew who he was, but he promised not to tell anyone, because Monsieur Poirot wanted to live quietly, without being bothered by people. So that's who he is, I said slowly. You've heard of him, of course? I'm rather an old fogey, as Caroline tells me, I said, but I have just heard of him. Extraordinary, commented Caroline. I don't know what she was referring to, possibly her own failure to uncover the truth. You want to go and see him? I asked slowly. Now, why? To get him to investigate this murder, of course, said Caroline sharply. Don't be so stupid, James. I was not really being stupid. Caroline does not always understand what I am driving at. You haven't got confidence in Inspector Davis, I went on. Of course she hasn't, said Caroline. I haven't either. Anyone would have thought it was Caroline's uncle who had been murdered. And how do you know he would take up the case? I asked. Remember, he has retired from active work. That's just it, said Flora simply. I've got to persuade him. You are sure you are doing wisely? I asked gravely. Of course she is, said Caroline. I'll go with her myself, if she likes. I'd rather the doctor came with me, if you don't mind, Miss Shepherd, said Flora. She knows the value of being direct on certain occasions. Any hints would certainly have been wasted on Caroline. You see, she explained, following directness with tact, Dr. Shepherd, being the doctor, and having found the body, he would be able to give all the details to Monsieur Poirot. Yes, said Caroline grudgingly. I see that. I took a turn or two up and down the room. Flora, I said gravely, be guided by me. I advise you not to drag this detective into the case. Flora sprang to her feet. The color rushed into her cheeks. I know why you say that, she cried, but it's exactly for that reason I'm so anxious to go. You're afraid, but I'm not. I know Ralph better than you do. Ralph, said Caroline. What has Ralph got to do with it? And neither of us heeded her. Ralph may be weak, continued Flora. He may have done foolish things in the past, wicked things even, but he wouldn't murder anyone. No, I exclaimed. I never thought of him. Then why did you go to the Three Boars last night? Demanded Flora. On your way home, after Uncle's body was found. I was momentarily silenced. I had hoped that visit of mine would remain unnoticed. How did you know about that? I countered. I went there this morning, said Flora. I heard from the servants that Ralph was staying there. I interrupted her. You had no idea that he was in King's Abbot? No, I was astounded. I couldn't understand it. I went there and asked for him. They told me what I suppose they told you last night, that he went out about 9 o'clock yesterday evening, and never came back. Her eyes met mine defiantly. And as though answering something in my look, she burst out. Well, why shouldn't he? He might have gone anywhere. He may even have gone back to London. Leaving his luggage behind? I asked gently. Flora stamped her foot. I don't care. There must be a simple explanation. And that's why you want to go to Hercule Poirot. Isn't it better to leave things as they are? The police don't suspect Ralph in the least, remember. They're working on quite another track. But that's just it, cried the girl. They do suspect him. A man from Cranchester turned up this morning. Inspector Ranklin. A horrid, weaselly little man. I found he had been to the Three Boars this morning before me. They told me all about his having been there, and the questions he had asked. He must think Ralph did it. That's a change of mind from last night, if so, I said slowly. He doesn't believe in Davis's theory that it was Parker, then. Parker, indeed, said my sister, and snorted. Flora came forward and laid her hand on my arm. Oh, Dr. Shepherd, let's go at once to this Monsieur Poirot. For some reason, that's just a tongue-tie there. He will find out the truth. My dear Flora, I said gently, laying my hand on hers, are you quite sure it is the truth we want? She looked at me, nodding her head gravely. You're not sure, she said. I am. I know Ralph better than you do. Of course he didn't do it, said Caroline, who had been keeping silent with great difficulty. Ralph may be extravagant, but he's a dear boy, and has the nicest manners. I wanted to tell Caroline that large numbers of murderers have had nice manners. But the presence of Flora restrained me. Since the girl was determined, I was forced to give in to her, and we started at once, getting away before my sister was able to fire off any more pronouncements, beginning with her favorite words, of course. An old woman with an immense Breton cap opened the door of the Larches to us. Monsieur Poirot was at home, it seemed. We were ushered into a little sitting room arranged with formal precision, and there, after the lapse of a minute or so, my friend of yesterday came to us. Monsieur le Docteur, he said, smiling. Mademoiselle. He bowed to Flora. Perhaps, I began, you have heard of the tragedy which occurred last night. His face grew grave. But certainly I have heard. It is horrible. I offer Mademoiselle all my sympathy. In what way can I serve you? Miss Ackroyd, I said, wants you to find the murderer, said Flora in a clear voice. I see, said the little man. But the police will do that, will they not? They might make a mistake, said Flora. They're on their way to make a mistake now, I think. Please, Monsieur Poirot, won't you help us? If it's a question of money... Poirot held up his hand. Not that, I beg of you, mademoiselle. Not that I do not care for money. His eyes showed a momentary twinkle. Money, it means much to me, and always has done. No, if I go into this, you must understand one thing clearly. I shall go through with it, to the end. The good dog, he does not leave the scent, remember. You may wish that, after all, you had left it to the local police. I want the truth, said Flora, looking him straight in the eyes. All the truth? All the truth. Then I accept, said the little man quietly, and I hope you will not regret those words. Now, tell me all the circumstances. Dr. Shepherd had better tell you, said Flora. He knows more than I do. Thus enjoined, I plunged into a careful narrative, embodying all the facts I have previously set down. Poirot listened carefully, inserting a question here and there, but for the most part sitting in silence, his eyes on the ceiling. I brought my story to a close with the departure of the inspector and myself from Fernley Park the previous night. And now, said Flora, as I finished, tell him all about Ralph. I hesitated, but her imperious glance drove me on. You went to this inn, this Three Boars, last night on your way home? Asked Poirot, as I brought my tale to a close. Now, exactly Why was that? I paused a moment to choose my words carefully. I thought someone ought to inform the young man of his uncle's death. It occurred to me after I had left Fernley that possibly no one but myself and Mr. Ackroyd were aware that he was staying in the village. Poirot nodded. Quite so. That was your only motive in going there, eh? That was my only motive, I said stiffly. It was not to, shall we say, reassure yourself about séjour? Reassure myself? I think, Monsieur le Docteur, that you know very well what I mean. Though you pretend not to do so, I suggest that it would have been a relief to you if you had found that Captain Paton had been at home all the evening. Not at all, I said sharply. The little detective shook his head at me gravely. You have not the trust in me of Miss Flora, he said, but no matter. What we have to look at is this. Captain Paton is missing, under circumstances which call for an explanation. I will not hide from you that the matter looks grave. Still, it may admit of a perfectly simple explanation. That's just what I keep saying, cried Flora eagerly. Poirot touched no more upon that theme. Instead, he suggested an immediate visit to the local police. We thought it better for Flora to return home, and for me to be the one to accompany him there and introduce him to the officer in charge of the case. We carried out this plan forthwith. We found Inspector Davis outside the police station looking very glum indeed. With him was Colonel Melrose, the chief constable, and another man whom, from Flora's description of Weasley, I had no difficulty in recognizing as Inspector Raglan from Grantchester. I know Melrose fairly well, and I introduced Poirot to him and explained the situation. The chief constable was clearly vexed, and Inspector Raglan looked as black as thunder. Davis, however, seemed slightly exhilarated by the sight of his superior officer's annoyance. The case is going to be as plain as a pikestaff, said Raglan. Not the least need for amateurs to come butting in. You think any fool would have had seen the way things were last night, and then we shouldn't have lost 12 hours. He directed a vengeful glance at poor Davis, who received it with perfect stolidity. Mr. Ackroyd's family must, of course, do what they see fit, said Colonel Melrose, but we cannot have the official investigation hampered in any way. I know Monsieur Poirot's great reputation, of course, he added courteously. The police can't advertise themselves, worse luck, said Raglan. It was Poirot who saved the situation. It is true that I have retired from the world, said he. I never intended to take up a case again. Above all things, I have the horror of publicity. I must beg that in the case of my being able to contribute something to the solution of the mystery, my name may not be mentioned. Inspector Raglan's face lightened a little. I've heard some very remarkable successes of yours, observed the colonel, thawing. I have had much experience, said Poirot quietly, but most of my successes have been obtained by the aid of the police. I admire enormously your English police. If Inspector Raglan permits me to assist him, I shall be both honored and flattered. The inspector's countenance became still more gracious. Colonel Melrose drew me aside. From all I hear, this little fellow's done some really remarkable things, he murmured. We're naturally anxious not to have to call in Scotland Yard. Raglan seems very sure of himself, but I'm not quite certain that I agree with him. You see, I know the parties concerned better than he does. This fellow doesn't seem out after kudos, does he? Would work with us unobtrusively, eh? To the greater glory of Inspector Raglan, I said solemnly. Well, well, said Colonel Melrose breezily in a louder voice, we must put you wise to the latest developments, Monsieur Poirot. I thank you, said Poirot. My friend, Dr. Shepherd, said something of the butler being suspected. That's all bunkum, said Raglan instantly. These high-class servants get in such a funk that they act suspiciously for nothing at all. The fingerprints, I hinted. Nothing like Parker's. He gave a faint smile and added, and yours and Mr. Raymond's don't fit either, Doctor. What about those of Captain Ralph Baton? Asked Poirot quietly. I felt a secret admiration for the way he took the bull by the horns. I saw a look of respect creep into the inspector's eye. I see you don't let the grass grow under your feet, Monsieur Poirot. It will be a pleasure to work with you, I'm sure. We're going to take that young gentleman's fingerprints as soon as we can lay hands upon him. I can't help thinking you're mistaken, Inspector, said Colonel Melrose warmly. I've known Ralph Batons from a boy upward. He'd never stoop to murder. Maybe not, said the inspector tonelessly. What have you got against him? I asked. We went out just on 9 last night. Was seen in the neighborhood of Fernley Park. Somewhere about 9:30. Not been seen since. Believed to be in serious money difficulties. I've put a pair of his shoes here, shoes with rubber studs in them. He had 2 pairs, almost exactly alike. I'm going up now to compare them with those footmarks. The constable is up there, seeing that no one tampers with them. We'll go at once, said Colonel Melrose. You and Monsieur Poirot will accompany us, will you not? We assented, and all drove up in the colonel's car. The inspector was anxious to get at once to the footmarks, and asked to be put down at the lodge, about halfway up the drive, on the right. A path branched off, which led round to the terrace and the window of Ackroyd's study. Would you like to go with the inspector, Monsieur Poirot? Asked the chief constable, or would you prefer to examine the study? Poirot chose the latter alternative. Parker opened the door to us. His manner was smug and deferential, and he seemed to have recovered from his panic of the night before. Colonel Melrose took a key from his pocket, and unlocking the door which led into the lobby, he ushered us through into the study. Except for the removal of the body, Monsieur Poirot, this room is exactly as it was last night. And the body was found where? As precisely as possible, I described Ackroyd's position. The armchair still stood in front of the fire. Poirot went and sat down in it. The blue letter you speak of, where was it when you left the room? Mr. Ackroyd had laid it down on this little table at his right hand. Poirot nodded. Except for that, everything was in its place? Yes, I think so. Colonel Melrose, would you be so extremely obliging as to sit down in this chair a minute? Thank you. Now, Monsieur le Docteur, will you kindly indicate to me the exact position of the dagger? I did so, whilst the little man stood in the doorway. The hilt of the dagger was plainly visible from the door, then. Both you and Parker could see it at once. Yes. Poirot went next to the window. The electric light was on, of course, when you discovered the body? He asked over his shoulder. I assented, and joined him where he was studying the marks on the windowsill. The rubber studs are the same pattern as those in Captain Paton's shoes, he said quietly. Then he came back once more to the middle of the room. His eye traveled round, searching everything in the room with a quick, trained glance. Are you a man of good observation, Dr. Shepherd? He asked at last. I think so, I said, surprised. There was a fire in the grate, I see. When you broke the door down and found Mr. Ackroyd dead, how was the fire? Was it low? I gave a vexed laugh. I can't really say. I didn't notice. Perhaps Mr. Raymond or Major Blunt. The little man opposite me shook his head with a faint smile. One must always proceed with method. I made an error of judgment in asking you that question. To each man his own knowledge. You could tell me the details of the patient's appearance. Nothing there would escape you. If I wanted information about the papers on that desk, Mr. Raymond would have noticed anything there was to see. To find out about the fire, I must ask the man whose business it is to observe such things. You permit." He moved swiftly to the fireplace and rang the bell. After a lapse of a minute or two, Parker appeared. "The bell rang, sir," he said hesitatingly. "Come in, Parker," said Colonel Melrose. "This gentleman wants to ask you something." Parker transferred a respectful attention to Poirot. "Parker," said the little man, "when you blew down the door with Dr. Shepherd last night, and found your master dead, what was the state of the fire?" Parker replied without a pause. "It had burned very low, sir. It was almost out." "Ah!" said Poirot. The exclamation almost sounded triumphant. He went on, "Look round you, my good Parker. Is this room exactly as it was then?" The butler's eyes swept round. It came to rest on the windows. "The curtains were drawn, sir, and the electric light was on." Poirot nodded approval. "Anything else?" Oop, I thought I muted there. Apologies. "Yes, sir. This chair was drawn out a little more." He indicated a big grandfather chair to the left of the door, between it and the window. I append a plan of the room with the chair in question marked with an X. Just a moment, I'll pull that diagram up shortly. And then let's just fix the sizing here. There we go. So yeah, so we have the layout of the study as we see here. The grandfather chair that was moved out just a little bit from where it was supposed to be. The table and the desk opposite the fireplace at the back of the room, behind the door. Yeah, it's kind of nice how well they're all laid out. The full floor plan was a little unexpected and a little overwhelming, but this one it goes a long way to grounding out the story. But yeah, so we see the chair that Ackroyd was found in, and the table right next to it. So it's a pretty simple room altogether, but the simplicity is, in and of itself, probably important. We'll leave that up on screen for a little bit. "Just show me," said Poirot. The butler drew the chair in question out a good 2 feet from the wall, turning it so that the seat faced the door. "Voilà! C'est curieux," murmured Poirot. "No one would want to sit in a chair in such a position, I fancy. Now, who pushed it back into place again, I wonder? Did you, my friend?" "No, sir," said Parker. "I was too upset with seeing my master and all." Poirot looked across at me. "Did you, Doctor?" I shook my head. It was back in position when I arrived with the police, sir," put in Parker. "I'm sure of that." "Curious," said Poirot again. "Raymond or Blunt must have pushed it back," I suggested. "Surely it isn't important." "It is completely unimportant," said Poirot. "That is why it is so interesting," he added softly. "Excuse me a minute," said Colonel Melrose. He left the room with Parker. "Do you think Parker is speaking the truth?" I asked. "About the chair? Yes. Otherwise I do not know. You will find, Monsieur le Docteur, that if you have much to do with cases of this kind, that they all resemble each other in one thing." "What is that?" I asked curiously. "Everyone concerned in them has something to hide." "Have I?" I asked, smiling. Poirot looked at me attentively. "I think you have," he said quietly. "But have you told me everything known to you about this young man, Paton?" He smiled as I grew red. "Oh, do not fear, I will not press you. I shall learn it in good time." "I wish you'd tell me something of your methods," I said hastily, to cover my confusion. "The point about the fire, for instance." "Oh, that was very simple. If you leave Mr. Ackroyd at 10 minutes to 9, was it not?" "Yes, exactly, I should say." "The window is then closed and bolted and the door unlocked. At 10:15, when the body is discovered, the door is locked and the window is open. Who opened it? Clearly, only Mr. Ackroyd himself could have done so. And for one of two reasons. Either because the room had become unbearably hot, since the fire was nearly out and there was a sharp drop in temperature last night. That cannot be the reason. Or because he admitted someone that way. And if he admitted someone that way, it must have been someone well known to him, since he had previously shown himself uneasy on the subject of that same window." "It sounds very simple," I said. "Everything is simple, if you arrange the facts methodically. We are concerned now with the personality of the person who was with him at 9:30 last night. Everything goes to show that that was the individual admitted by the window, and though Mr. Ackroyd was seen alive later by Miss Flora, we cannot approach a solution of the mysteries until we know who that visitor was. The window may have been left open after his departure, and so afforded entrance to the murderer. Or the same person may have returned a second time. Ah, here's the Colonel who returns." Colonel Melrose entered with an animated manner. "That telephone call has been traced at last," he said. "It did not come from here. It was put through to Dr. Shepherd at 10:15 last night from a public call office at King's Abbot Station, and at 10:23 the night mail leaves for Liverpool." Brings us to the end of Chapter 7. So, Poirot's identity is revealed, and we have the detective, the central motivating force, the animation of so many of Christie's works. This is one of the major recurring characters that she likes to use. So this is her own Sherlock. So we get to see how things go. It is interesting that he's got a very similar but also very different sort of characterization than we see from Holmes. He's got the eccentricity, but also he's less gruff and more esoteric. I think he's sort of seen rather as an outsider rather than some urbane autist. All right, let's continue now, because this is starting to get interesting as we're starting to see the deductions starting to pile on. But also the mustache, yes. He's got a splendid mustache, and apparently terrible hair, if I remember right. It's bald with a fantastic mustache. And you know what? I can dig it. I can dig it. Alright. Chapter 8. Inspector Raglan is confident. I have a feeling this book is going to about do me in, though. There are so many characters that are coming up with some regularity. I'm having trouble distinguishing all the voices. So, bear with me if I play it a little fast and loose. I'll try and at least keep Poirot standard. Narrator's easy. That's just done natural voice, so we'll see. Alright, Chapter 8. Inspector Raglan is confident. We looked at each other. "You'll have inquiries made at the station, of course," I said. "Naturally, but I'm not over sanguine as to the result. You know what the station is like." I did. King's Abbot is a mere village. but its station happens to be an important junction. Most of the big expresses stop there, and trains are shunted, resorted, and made up. It has 2 or 3 public telephone boxes. At that time of night, 3 local trains come in and close upon each other to catch the connection with the express for the north, which comes in at 10:19 and leaves at 10:23. The whole place is in a bustle, and the chances of one particular person being noticed telephoning or getting into the express are very small indeed. "But why telephone at all?" demanded Melrose. That is what I find so extraordinary. There seems no rhyme or reason in the thing." Poirot carefully straightened a china ornament on one of the bookcases. "Be sure there was a reason," he said over his shoulder. "But what reason could it be? When we know that, we shall know everything. This case is very curious and very interesting." There was something almost indescribable in the way he said those last words. I felt that he was looking at the case from some peculiar angle of his own, and what I saw I could not tell. He went to the window and stood there, looking out. "You say it was 9 o'clock, Dr. Shepherd, when you met this stranger outside the gate?" He asked the question without turning round. "Yes," I replied. "I heard the church clock chime the hour." "How long would it take him to reach the house? To reach this window, for instance?" 5 minutes at the outside. 2 or 3 minutes only if he took the path at the right of the drive and came straight here." "But to do that, he would have to know the way. How can I explain myself? It would mean that he had been here before, that he knew his surroundings." "That is true," replied Colonel Melrose. "We could find out, doubtless, if Mr. Ackroyd had received any strangers during the past week." "Young Raymond could tell us that," I said. "Or Parker," suggested Colonel Melrose. "Or tous les deux," suggested Poirot, smiling. Colonel Melrose went in search of Raymond, and I rang the bell once more for Parker. Colonel Melrose returned almost immediately, accompanied by the young secretary, whom he introduced to Poirot. Geoffrey Raymond was fresh and debonair as ever. He seemed surprised and delighted to make Poirot's acquaintance. "No idea you've been living among us incognito, Monsieur Poirot," he said. "It will be a great privilege to watch you at work. Hello, what's this?" Poirot had been standing just to the left of the door. Now he moved aside suddenly, and I saw that, while my back was turned, he must have swiftly drawn out the armchair till it stood in the position Parker had indicated. "Want me to sit in the chair whilst you take a blood test?" asked Raymond good-humouredly. "What's the idea?" "Monsieur Raymond, this chair was pulled out, so last night, when Mr. Ackroyd was found killed, someone moved it back again into place. Did you do so?" The secretary's reply came without a second's hesitation. "No, indeed I didn't. I don't even remember that it was in that position, but it must have been if you say so. Anyway, somebody else must have moved it back to its proper place. Have they destroyed a clue in doing so? Too bad." "It is of no consequence," said the detective. "Of no consequence whatever. What I really want to ask you is this, Mr. Raymond. Did any stranger come to see Mr. Ackroyd during this past week?" The secretary reflected for a minute or two, knitting his brows, and, during the pause, Parker appeared in answer to the bell. "No," said Raymond at last. "I can't remember anyone. Can you, Parker?" "I beg your pardon, sir. Any stranger coming to see Mr. Ackroyd this week?" The butler reflected for a minute or two. "There was the young man who came on Wednesday, sir," he said at last. "From Curtis and Trout, I understood he was." Raymond moved this aside with an impatient hand. "Oh, yes, I remember. But that is not the kind of stranger this gentleman means," he asked. He turned to Poirot. "Mr. Ackroyd had some idea of purchasing a dictaphone," he explained. "It would have enabled us to get through a lot more work in a limited time. The firm in question sent down their representative, but nothing came of it. Mr. Ackroyd did not make up his mind to purchase." Poirot turned to the butler. "Can you describe this young man to me, my good Parker?" "He was fair-haired, sir, and short, very neatly dressed, in a blue serge suit. A very presentable young man, sir, for his station in life." Poirot turned to me. "The man you met outside the gate, Doctor, was tall, was he not?" "Yes," I said, "somewhere about 6 feet, I should say." "There is nothing in that, then," declared the Belgian. "Belgian? Okay. I thank you, Parker." The butler spoke to Raymond. "Mr. Hammond has just arrived, sir," he said. "He is anxious to know if he can be of any service, and he would be glad to have a word with you." "I'll come at once," said the young man. He hurried out. Poirot looked inquiringly at the chief constable. "The family solicitor, Monsieur Poirot," said the latter. "It's a busy time for this young Monsieur Raymond," murmured Monsieur Poirot. "He has the air efficient, that one." I believe Mr. Ackroyd considered him a most able secretary. "He has been here how long?" "Just on 2 years, I fancy." "His duties he fulfills punctiliously. Of that I am sure. In what manner does he amuse himself? Does he go in for le sport?" "Private secretaries haven't much time for that sort of thing," said Colonel Melrose, smiling. "Raymond plays golf, I believe, and tennis in the summertime." He does not attend the courses? I should say, the running of the horses?" "Race meetings? No, I don't think he's interested in racing." Poirot nodded and seemed to lose interest. He glanced slowly round the study. "I have seen, I think, all that there is to be seen here." I too looked round. "If those walls could speak," I murmured. Poirot shook his head. "A tongue is not enough," he said. "They would have to also have eyes and ears. But do not be too sure that these dead things," he touched the top of the bookcase as he spoke, "are always dumb. To me, they speak sometimes. Chairs, tables, they have their message." He turned away towards the door. "What message?" I cried. "What have they said to you today?" He looked over his window and raised one eyebrow quizzically. "An open window," he said, "a locked door, a chair that apparently moved itself. To all the three I say, 'Why?' and I find no answer." He shook his head. I puffed out his chest and stood blinking at us. He looked ridiculously full of his own importance. It crossed my mind to wonder whether he was really any good as a detective. Had his big reputation been built up on a series of lucky chances? I think the same thought must have occurred to Colonel Melrose, for he frowned. "Anything more you want to see, Monsieur Poirot?" he inquired brusquely. "You would perhaps be so kind as to show me the silver table from which the weapon was taken. After that, I will trespass on your kindness no longer." We went to the drawing room, but on the way, the constable waylaid the colonel. And after a muttered conversation, the latter excused himself and left us together. I showed Poirot to the silver table, and after raising the lid once or twice and letting it fall, he pushed open the window and stepped out on the terrace. I followed him. Inspector Raglan had just turned the corner of the house and was coming toward us. His face looked grim and satisfied. "So there you are, Monsieur Poirot," he said. "Well, this isn't going to be much of a case. I'm sorry, too. A nice enough young fellow gone wrong." Poirot's face fell, and he spoke very mildly. "I am afraid I shall not be able to be of much aid to you, then." Next time, perhaps, said the inspector soothingly. Though we don't have murders every day in this quiet little corner of the world. Poirot's gaze took on an admiring quality. You have been of a marvelous promptness, he observed. How exactly did you go to work, if I may ask? Certainly, said the inspector. To begin with, method. That's what they always say. That's what I always say, method. Ah, cried the other. That, too, is my watchword. Method, order, and the little grey cells. The cells? Said the inspector, staring. The little grey cells of the brain, explained the Belgian. Oh, of course. Well, we all use them, I suppose. In a greater or lesser degree, murmured Poirot. And there are two differences in quality. Then there is the psychology of a crime. One must study that. Said the inspector. You've been bitten with all this psychoanalysis stuff. Now, I'm a plain man. Mrs. Raglan would not agree, I am sure to that, said Poirot, bidding him a little bow. Inspector Raglan, a little taken aback, bowed. You don't understand, he said, grinning broadly. Lord, what a lot of difference language makes. I'm telling you how I set to work. First of all, Mr. Ackroyd was last seen alive at 9:45 by his niece, Miss Flora Ackroyd. That's fact number 1, isn't it? If you say so. Well, it is. At 10:30, the doctor here says that Mr. Ackroyd has been dead at least half an hour. You stick to that, doctor? Certainly, I said. Half an hour or longer. Very good. That gives us exactly 1/4 hour in which the crime must have been committed. I make a list of everyone in the house and walk through it, setting down opposite their names where they were and what they were doing between the hour of 9:45 and 10 p.m. He handed a sheet of paper to Poirot. I read it over his shoulder. It ran as follows, written in a neat script. Major Blunt, in billiard room with Mr. Raymond. Latter confirms. Mr. Raymond, billiard room. See above. Mrs. Ackroyd, 9:45, watching billiard match. Went up to bed 9:55. Raymond and Blunt watched her up staircase. Miss Ackroyd went straight from her uncle's room upstairs. Confirmed by Parker. Also, housemaid Elsie Dale. Servants. Parker went straight to butler's pantry. Confirmed by housekeeper Miss Russell, who came down to speak to him about something at 9:47, and remained at least 10 minutes. Miss Russell, as above, spoke to housemaid Elsie Dale, upstairs at 9:45. Ursula Bourne, parlour-maid, in her own room until 9:55, then in servants' hall. Mrs. Cooper, the cook, in servants' hall. Gladys Jones, second housemaid, in servants' hall. Elsie Dale, upstairs in bedroom, seen there by Miss Russell and Miss Flora Ackroyd. Mary Thripp, kitchen maid, servants' hall. The cook has been here 7 years, the parlour-maid 18 months, and Parker just over a year. The others are new, except for something fishy about Parker. They all seem quite all right. A very complete list, said Poirot, handing it back to him. I am quite sure that Parker did not do the murder, he added gravely. So is my sister, I struck in, and she's usually right. Nobody paid any attention to my interpolation. That disposes very effectually of the household, continued the inspector. Now we come to a very grave point. The woman at the lodge, Mary Black, was pulling the curtains last night when she saw Ralph Patton turn in at the gate and go up towards the house. She is sure of that? I asked sharply. Quite sure. She knows him well by sight. He went past very quickly and turned off by the path to the right, which is a shortcut to the terrace. And what time was that? Asked Poirot, who had sat with an immovable face. Exactly 25 minutes past 9, said the inspector gravely. There was a silence. Then the inspector spoke again. It's all clear enough. It fits in without a flaw. At 25 minutes past 9, Captain Patton is seen passing the lodge. At 9:30 or thereabouts, Mr. Geoffrey Raymond hears someone in here asking for money, and Mr. Ackroyd refusing. What happens next? Captain Patton leaves the same way. go through the window. He walks along the terrace, angry and baffled, comes to the open drawing-room window. Say it's now 10:15. Miss Flora Ackroyd is saying good night to her uncle. Major Blunt, Mr. Raymond, and Mr. Ackroyd are in the billiard room. And Mrs. Ackroyd are in the billiard room. The drawing room is empty. He steals in, takes the dagger from the silver table, and returns to the study window. He slips off his shoes, climbs in, and, well, I don't need to go into details. Then he slips out again, and goes off. Hadn't the nerve to go back to the inn. He makes for the station, rings up from there. Why? Said Poirot softly. I jumped at the interruption. The little man was leaning forward. His eyes shone with a queer green light. For a moment, Inspector Raglan was taken aback by the question. It's difficult to say exactly why he did that, he said at last, but murderers do funny things. You'd know that if you were in the police force. The cleverest of them make stupid mistakes sometimes. But come along and I'll show you those footprints. We followed him round the corner of the terrace to the study window. At a word from Raglan, a police constable produced the shoes, which had been obtained from the local inn. The inspector laid them over the marks. They're the same, he said confidently. That is to say, they're not the same pair that actually made these prints. He went away in those. This is a pair just like them, but older. See how the studs are worn down. Surely a great many people wear shoes with rubber studs in them, asked Poirot. That's so, of course, said the inspector. I shouldn't put so much stress on the footmarks, if it wasn't for everything else. A very foolish young man, Captain Ralph Patton, said Poirot thoughtfully, to leave so much evidence of his presence. Ah, well, said the inspector, it is a dry, fine night, you know. He left no prints on the terrace or the gravelled path, but unluckily for him, a spring must have welled up just lately at the end of the path from the drive. See here. A small gravelled path joined the terrace a few feet away. In one spot, a few yards from its termination, the ground was wet and boggy. Crossing this wet place, there were again the marks of footsteps, and amongst them the shoes with rubber studs. Poirot followed the path on a little way, the inspector by his side. You notice the woman's footprints? He said suddenly. The inspector laughed. Naturally. But several different women have walked this way, and men as well. It's a regular shortcut to the house, you see. It would be impossible to sort out all the footsteps. After all, it's the ones on the windowsill that are really important. Poirot nodded. It's no good going farther, said the inspector. As we came in view of the drive, it's all gravelled again here. As hard as can be. Again Poirot nodded, but his eyes were fixed on a small garden house. A kind of superior summer house. It was a little to the left of the path ahead of us, and a gravelled walk ran up to it. Poirot lingered about until the inspector had gone back towards the house. Then he looked at me. You must have indeed been sent from the good God to replace my friend Hastings, he said with a twinkle. I observe that you do not quit my side. How say you, Dr. Shepherd? Shall we investigate that summer house? It interests me. He went up to the door and opened it. Inside, the place was almost dark. There were one or two rustic seats, a croquet set, and some folded deck chairs. I was startled to observe my new friend. He had dropped to his hands and knees and was crawling about the floor. Every now and then, he shook his head as though not satisfied. Finally, he sat back on his heels. Nothing, he murmured. Well, perhaps it was not to be expected. Well, but it would have meant so much. He broke off, stiffening all over. Then he stretched out his hand to one of the rustic chairs. He detached something from one side of it. What is it? I cried. What have you found? He smiled, unclosing his hand so that I could see what lay in the palm of it. A scrap of stiff, white cambric. I took it from him, looked at it curiously, and then handed it back. What do you make of it, my friend? He asked, eyeing me keenly. A scrap torn from a handkerchief," I suggested, shrugging my shoulders. He made another dart and picked up a small quill, a goose quill by the look of it. "And that?" he cried triumphantly. "What do you make of that?" I only stared. He slipped the quill into his pocket and looked again at the scrap of white stuff. "A fragment of a handkerchief," he mused. "Perhaps you are right, but remember this. A good laundry does not starch a handkerchief." He looked at me triumphantly. Then he put away the scrap carefully in his pocketbook. That brings us to the end of Chapter 8, and there have been developments. Poirot is on the trail of something, someone, sort of finding things that are escaping the view of the inspector and the constables and everyone. So we'll see what sort of deductions he's able to piece together from these little, seemingly innocuous clues. This is feeling every bit as much of the detective story as Sherlock Holmes was, and enjoying it quite a bit. The difference of character is showing through, but the same attention to detail is a common thread. And that was one of the best part of detective fiction. It's the media thrives on the tiny details and surprises coming out that are every bit as much a surprise to the reader as they are to the characters in the book. Alright, let's go ahead and take a short break. We've probably got enough time in us for another 2 chapters or so, I'd guess. These aren't terribly long, but I do need to stretch a little bit and wet the whistle. So, we'll be back in just a few minutes, where we will continue from Chapter 9. All right, we are back. All right, and so let's continue where we left off with Chapter 9 of The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. This is an interesting one so far, and I'd be ashamed to lose too much time to just dinking around. Let's just keep out the book, shall we? So, Chapter 9, The Goldfish Pond. Yes, welcome back, Simba. We walked back to the house together. There was no sign of the inspector. Poirot paused on the terrace and stood with his back to the house, slowly turning his head from side to side. "Une belle propriété," he said at last appreciatively. "Who inherits it?" His words gave me almost a shock. It is an odd thing, but until that moment the question of inheritance had never come into my head. Poirot watched me keenly. "It is a new idea to you, that," he said at last. "You had not thought of it before, eh?" No, I said truthfully. I wish I had." He looked at me again curiously. "I wonder just what you mean by that," he said thoughtfully. "Ah, no, as I was about to speak. Inutile. You would not tell me your real thought." "Everyone has something to hide," I quoted, smiling. "Exactly." "You still believe that?" "More than ever, my friend. But it is not easy to hide things from Hercule Poirot. He has a knack of finding out." He descended the steps of the Dutch garden as he spoke. "Let us walk a little," he said over his shoulder. "The air is pleasant today." I followed him. He led me down a path to the left enclosed in yew hedges. A walk led down the middle, bordered each side with formal flower beds, and at the end was a round, paved recess with a seat and a pond of goldfish. Instead of pursuing the path to the end, Poirot took another, which wound up the side of a wooded slope. In one spot, the trees had been cleared away, and a seat had been put. Sitting there, one had a splendid view over the countryside, and one looked right down on the paved recess and the goldfish pond. "England is very beautiful," said Poirot, his eyes straying over the prospect. Then he smiled. "And so are English girls," he said in a lower tone. "Hush, my friend, and look at the pretty picture below us." It was then that I saw Flora. She was moving along the path we had just left, and she was humming a little snatch of song. Her step was more dancing than walking, and in spite of her black dress, there was nothing but joy in her whole attitude. She gave a sudden pirouette on her toes, and her black draperies swung out. At the same time, she flung back her head and laughed outright. As she did so, a man stepped out from the trees. It was Hector Blunt. The man started. Her expression changed a little. "How you startled me! I didn't see you." Blunt said nothing, but stood looking at her for a minute or two of silence. "What I like about you," said Flora with a touch of malice, "is your cheery conversation." I fancied that at that, Blunt reddened under his tan. His voice, when he spoke, sounded different. It had a curious sort of humility in it. "Never much of a fellow for talking, not even when I was young." "That was a very long time ago, I suppose," said Flora gravely. I caught the undercurrent of laughter in her voice, but I don't think Blunt did. "Yes," he said simply, "it was." "How does it feel to be Methuselah?" asked Flora. This time, the laughter was more apparent, but Blunt was following out an idea of his own. "Remember that Johnny, who sold his soul to the devil, in return for being made young again? There's an opera about it." "Faust, you mean?" "That's the beggar. Rum story. Some of us would do it if we could." "Anyone would think you were creaking at the joints to hear you talk," cried Flora, half vexed, half amused. Blunt said nothing for a minute or two. Then he looked away from Flora, into the middle distance, and observed to an adjacent tree trunk that it was about time he got back to Africa. Are you going on another expedition? Shooting things? Expect so. Usually do, you know. Shoot things, I mean. You shot that head in the hall, didn't you? Blunt nodded. Then he jerked out, going rather red as he did so. Care for some decent skins anytime? If so, I can get them for you. Oh, please do, cried Flora. Will you really? You won't forget? I shan't forget, said Hector Blunt. He added, in a sudden burst of communicativeness. The time I went. I'm no good in this sort of life. Haven't got the manners for it. I'm a rough fellow, no use in society. Never remembering the things one's expected to say. Yes, time I went. But you're not going at once, cried Flora. Not while we're all in this trouble. Oh, please, if you go... She turned away a little. You want me to stay? Asked Blunt. He spoke deliberately, but quite simply. We all... I meant you personally, said Blunt with directness. Flora turned slowly back again and met his eyes. I want you to stay, she said, if that makes any difference. It makes all the difference, said Blunt. There was a moment's silence. They sat down on the stone seat by the goldfish pond. It seemed as though neither of them knew quite what to say next. It's such a lovely morning, said Flora at last. You know, I can't help feeling happy, in spite of everything. That's awful, I suppose. Quite natural, said Blunt. Never saw your uncle until 2 years ago, did you? Can't be expected to grieve very much. Much better to have no humbug about it. There's something awfully consoling about you, said Flora. You make things so simple. Things are simple, as a rule, said the big game hunter. Not always, said Flora. Her voice had lowered itself, and I saw Blunt turn and look at her, bringing his eyes back from, apparently, the coast of Africa to do so. He evidently put his own construction on her change of tone. For, he said, after a minute or two, in rather an abrupt manner, I say, you know, you mustn't worry. About the young chap, I mean. Inspector's an ass, everybody knows. Utterly absurd to think he could have done it. A man from outside, burglar chap. That's the only possible solution. Flora turned to look at him. You really think so? Don't you? Said Blunt quickly. Oh, yes, of course. Another silence, and then Flora burst out, I'll tell you why I felt so happy this morning. However heartless you think me. I'd rather tell you. It's because the lawyer has been here, Mr. Hammond. He told us about the will. Uncle Roger has left me £20,000. Think of it. 20,000 beautiful pounds. Blunt looked surprised. Does it mean so much to you? Mean much to me? Why, it's everything. Freedom. Life. No more scheming and scraping and lying. Lying? Said Blunt, sharply interrupting. Flora seemed taken aback for a minute. You know what I mean, she said uncertainly. Pretending to be thankful for all the nasty, cast-off things rich relations give you. Last year's coats and skirts and hats. Don't know much about ladies' clothes. Should have said you were always very well turned out. It's cost me something, though, said Flora in a low voice. Don't let's talk of horrid things. I'm so happy. I'm free. Free to do what I like. Free not to. She stopped suddenly. Not to what? Asked Blunt quickly. I forget now. Nothing important. Blunt had a stick in his hand, and he thrust it into the pond, poking at something. What are you doing, Major Blunt? There's something bright down there. Wondered what it was. Looks like a gold brooch. Now I've stirred up the mud and it's gone. Perhaps it's a crown, suggested Flora. Like the one Melisande saw in the water? Melisande, said Blunt reflexively. She's in an opera, isn't she? Yes. You seem to know a lot about operas. People take me sometimes, said Blunt sadly. Funny idea of pleasure. Worse racket that the natives make with their tom-toms. Flora laughed. I remember Melisande, continued Blunt. Married an old chap, old enough to be her father. He threw a small piece of flint into the goldfish pond. Then, with a change of manner, he turned to Flora. Miss Ackroyd, can I do anything? About Patton, I mean. I know how dreadfully anxious you must be. Thank you, said Flora in a cold voice. There is really nothing to be done. Ralph will be all right. I've got hold of the most wonderful detective in the world. He's going to find out all about it. For some time I had felt uneasy as to our position. We were not exactly eavesdropping, since the two in the garden below had only to lift their heads to see us. Nevertheless, I should have drawn attention to our presence, before now, had not my companion put a warning pressure on my arm. Clearly, he wished me to remain silent. But now he rose briskly to his feet, clearing his throat. "Ha ha! I demand pardon," he cried. "I cannot allow Mademoiselle thus extravagantly to compliment me, and not draw attention to my presence. They say the listener hears no good of himself, but that is not the case this time. To spare my blushes, I must join you and apologize." He hurried down the path with me close behind him, and joined the others by the pond. "This is Monsieur Hercule Poirot," said Flora. "I expect you've heard of him." Poirot bowed. "I know Major Blunt by reputation," he said politely. "I am glad to have encountered you, monsieur. I am in need of some information that you can give me." Blunt looked at him inquiringly. "When did you last see Monsieur Ackroyd alive?" "At dinner." "And you neither saw nor heard anything of him after that?" "Didn't see him. Heard his voice." "How was that?" "I strolled out on the terrace." "Pardon me. What time was this?" "About 9:30. I was walking up and down, smoking in front of the drawing-room window. I heard Ackroyd talking in his study." Poirot stopped and removed a microscopic weed. "Surely you couldn't hear voices in the study from that part of the terrace," he murmured. He was not looking at Blunt, but I was, and to my intense surprise, I saw the latter flush. "Went as far as the corner," he explained unwillingly. "Ah, indeed," said Poirot. In the mildest manner, he conveyed an impression that more was wanted. "Thought I saw a woman disappearing into the bushes. Just a gleam of white, you know. Must have been mistaken. It was while I was standing at the corner of the terrace that I heard Ackroyd's voice speaking to that secretary of his." "Speaking to Mr. Geoffrey Raymond?" "Yes, that's what I supposed at the time. Seems I was wrong." "Mr. Ackroyd didn't address him by name?" "Oh, no." "Then, if I may ask, why did you think—" Blunt explained laboriously. "Took it for granted that it would be Raymond, because he had said just before I came out that he was taking some papers to Ackroyd. Never thought of it being anybody else." "Can you remember what the words you heard were?" "Afraid I can't. Something quite ordinary and unimportant. Only caught a scrap of it. I was thinking of something else at the time." "It is of no importance," murmured Poirot. "Did you move a chair back against the wall when you went into the study after the body was discovered?" "Chair? No. Why should I?" Poirot shrugged his shoulders, but did not answer. He turned to Flora. "There is one thing I should like to know from you, mademoiselle. When you were examining the things in the silver table with Dr. Shepherd, was the dagger in its place, or was it not?" Flora's chin shot up. "Inspector Raglan has been asking me about that," she said resentfully. "I've told him, and I'll tell you, I'm perfectly certain the dagger was not there. He thinks it was, and that Ralph sneaked it later in the evening, and he doesn't believe me. He thinks I'm saying it to shield Ralph." "And aren't you?" I asked gravely. Flora stamped her foot. "You too, Dr. Shepherd! Oh, it's too bad." Poirot tactfully made a diversion. "It is true what I heard you say, Major Blunt. There is something that glitters in this pond. Let us see if I can reach it." He knelt down by the pond, bearing his arm to the elbow, and lowered it in very slowly, so as not to disturb the bottom of the pond. But in spite of all his precautions, the mud eddied and swirled. He was forced to draw his arm out again empty-handed. He gazed ruefully at the mud upon his arm. I offered him my handkerchief, which he accepted with fervent protestations of thanks. Blunt looked at his watch. "Nearly lunchtime," he said. "We'd better be getting back to the house." "You will lunch with us, Mr. Poirot?" asked Flora. "I should like you to meet my mother. She is very fond of Ralph." The little man bowed. "I shall be delighted, mademoiselle." "And you will stay too, won't you, Dr. Shepherd?" I hesitated. "Oh, do!" I wanted to, so I accepted the invitation without further ceremony. We set out toward the house, Flora and Blunt walking ahead. "What hair!" said Poirot to me in a low tone, nodding towards Flora. "The real gold. They will make a pretty couple, she and the dark, handsome Captain Baton, will they not?" I looked at him inquiringly, but he began to fuss about a few microscopic drops of water on his coat sleeve. The man reminded me in some ways of a cat, his green eyes and his finicking habits. "And all for nothing, too," I said sympathetically. "I wonder what it was in the pond." "Would you like to see?" asked Poirot. I stared at him. He nodded. "My good friend," he said gently and reproachfully, "Hercule Poirot does not run the risk of disarranging his costume without being sure of attaining his object. To do so would be ridiculous and absurd. I am never ridiculous." "But you brought your hand out empty," I objected. "There are times when it is necessary to have discretion. Do you tell your patients everything, Doctor? I think not. Nor do you tell your excellent sister everything either. Is it not so? Before showing my empty hand, I dropped what it contained into my other hand. You shall see what it was." He held out his left hand, palm open. On it lay a little circlet of gold, a woman's wedding ring. I took it from him. "Look inside," commanded Poirot. I did so. Inside was an inscription in fine writing. "From R. March 13th. I looked at Poirot, but he was busy inspecting his appearance with a tiny pocket glass. He paid particular attention to his mustaches, and none at all to me. I saw that he did not intend to be communicative. Oh boy. Alright, so that is the end of chapter 9. And, oh my, there are developments afoot. Seems that Roger may have in fact given a ring to maybe the widow in the first couple chapters that it had presumably killed herself. So there are developments upon developments here, and clues that may or may not find themselves to be relevant. So let's try and get one more chapter in tonight. Probably about the right timetable we've got, and we will see if any more of these sorts of developments come to light. We'll be just short of the halfway point by the time we get done with this. Alright, chapter 10. The Parlor Maid. We found Mrs. Ackroyd in the hall. With her was a small, dried-up little man, with an aggressive chin and sharp grey eyes, and "lawyer" written all over him. "Mr. Hammond is staying to lunch with us," said Mrs. Ackroyd. "You know Major Blunt, Mr. Hammond, and dear Dr. Shepherd, also a close friend of poor Roger's, and let me see." She paused, surveying Hercule Poirot in some perplexity. "This is Monsieur Poirot, mother," said Flora. "I told you about him this morning." "Oh, yes," said Mrs. Ackroyd vaguely. "Of course, my dear, of course. He is to find Ralph, is he not?" "He is to find out who killed Uncle," said Flora. "Oh, my dear," cried her mother. "Please, my poor nerves. I am a wreck this morning. A positive wreck. Such a dreadful thing to happen. I can't help feeling that it must have been an accident of some kind. Roger was so fond of handling queer curios. His hand must have slipped, or something." This theory was received in polite silence. I saw Poirot edge up to the lawyer and speak to him in a confidential undertone. They moved aside into the embrasure of the window. I joined them, then hesitated. "Perhaps I'm intruding?" I said.
"Not at all,"
said Poirot heartily.
"You and I, Monsieur the Doctor, we investigate this affair side by side. Without you, I should be lost. I desire a little information from the good Mr. Hammond."
"You are acting on behalf of Captain Ralph Buckthorne, I understand?" said the lawyer cautiously.
Poirot shook his head. "Not so. I am acting in the interests of justice. Miss Ackroyd has asked me to investigate the death of her uncle."
Mr. Hammond seemed slightly taken back.
"I cannot seriously believe that Captain Patton should be concerned in this crime," he said. "However strong the circumstantial evidence against him may be, the mere fact that he was hard-pressed for money—"
"Was he hard-pressed for money?" interpolated Poirot quickly.
The lawyer shrugged his shoulders. "It was a chronic condition with Ralph Patton," he said dryly. "Money went through his hands like water. He was always applying to his stepfather."
"Had he done so of late? During the last year, for instance?"
"I cannot say. Mr. Ackroyd did not mention the fact to me."
"I comprehend. Mr. Hammond, I take it that you are acquainted with the provisions of Mr. Ackroyd's will?"
"Certainly. That is my principal business here today."
"Then, seeing that I am acting for Miss Ackroyd, you will not object to telling me the terms of that will?"
"They are quite simple, shorn of legal phraseology, and after paying certain legacies and bequests."
"Such as?" interrupted Poirot.
Mr. Hammond seemed a little surprised. £1,000 to his housekeeper, Miss Russell, £50 to the cook, Emma Cooper, £500 to his secretary, Mr. Geoffrey Raymond, then to various hospitals. Poirot held up his hand. "Ah, the charitable bequests, they interest me not." "Quite so. The income on £10,000 worth of shares to be paid to Mrs. Cecil Ackroyd during her lifetime. Miss Flora Ackroyd inherits £20,000 outright. The residue, including this property and the shares in Ackroyd & Son, are to his adopted son, Ralph Patton."
"Mr. Ackroyd possessed a large fortune?"
"A very large fortune. Captain Patton will be an exceedingly wealthy young man." There was a silence. Poirot and the lawyer looked at each other.
"Mr. Hammond,"
came Mrs. Ackroyd's voice plaintively from the fireplace. The lawyer answered the summons. Poirot took my arm and drew me right into the window.
"Regard the irises," he remarked in a rather loud voice. "Magnificent, are they not? A straight and pleasing effect."
At the same time, I felt the pressure of his hand on my arm, and he added in a low tone,
"Do you really wish to aid me? To take part in this investigation?"
"Yes, indeed," I said eagerly. "There's nothing I should like better. I don't know what a dull old fogey's life I lead. Never anything out of the ordinary."
"Good. We will be colleagues, then. In a minute or two, I fancy Major Blunt will join us. He is not happy with the good mamma. Now, there are some things I want to know, but I do not wish to seem to want to know them. You comprehend? So it will be your part to ask the questions."
"What questions do you want me to ask?" I asked apprehensively.
"I want you to introduce the name of Mrs. Farrar."
"Yes?"
"Speak of her in a natural fashion. Ask him if he was down here when her husband died. You understand the kind of thing I mean. And while he replies, watch his face without seeming to watch it. C'est compris?"
There was no time for more, for at that minute, as Poirot had prophesied, Blunt left the others in his abrupt fashion and came over to us. I suggested strolling on the terrace, and he acquiesced. Poirot stayed behind. I stopped to examine a late rose. How things change in the course of a day or so, I observed. I was up here last Wednesday, I remember, walking up and down this same terrace. Ackroyd was full of spirits, and now, 3 days later, Ackroyd's dead. Poor fellow. Mrs. Farrar's dead. You knew her, didn't you? But of course you did. Blunt nodded his head. Had you seen her since you've been down this time? Went with Ackroyd to call. Last Tuesday, I think it was. Fascinating woman. But something queer about her. Deep. One would never know what she was up to. I looked into his steady grey eyes. Nothing was there, surely. I went on. I suppose you'd met her before. Last time I was here, she and her husband had just come here to live. He paused a minute, then added, rum thing. She had changed a lot between then and now. How changed? I asked. Looked 10 years older. Were you down here when her husband died? I asked, trying to make the question sound as casual as possible. No. From all I heard, it would be a good riddance. Uncharitable, perhaps, but the truth. I agreed. Ashley Farrar was by no means a pattern husband, I said cautiously. Blackout, I thought, said Blunt. No, I said. Only a man with more money than was good for him. Ah, money. All the troubles in the world can be put down to money, or the lack of it. Which has been your particular trouble? I asked. I have enough of what I want. I'm one of the lucky ones. Indeed. I'm not too flush just now, as a matter of fact. Came into a legacy a year ago, and like a fool, let myself be persuaded into putting it into some wildcat scheme. I sympathized, and narrated my own similar trouble. Then the gong pealed out, and we all went in to lunch. Poirot drew me back a little. Yeah, bien? He's all right, I said. I'm sure of it. Nothing disturbing. He had a legacy just a year ago, I said. But why not? Why shouldn't he? I'll swear the man is perfectly square and above board. Without doubt, said Poirot soothingly. Do not upset yourself. He spoke as though to a fractious child. We all trooped into the dining room. It seemed incredible that less than 24 hours had passed since I last sat at that table. Afterwards, Mrs. Ackroyd took me aside and sat down with me on a sofa. I can't help feeling a little hurt, she murmured, producing a handkerchief of the kind obviously not meant to be cried into. Hurt, I mean, by Roger's lack of confidence in me. That £20,000 ought to have been left to me, not to Flora. A mother could be trusted to safeguard the interests of her child. Lack of trust, I call it. You forget, Mrs. Ackroyd, I said. Flora was Ackroyd's own niece, a blood relation. It would have been different had you been his sister instead of his sister-in-law. As poor Cecil's widow, I think my feelings ought to have been considered, said the lady, touching her eyelashes gingerly with the handkerchief. But Roger was always most peculiar, not to say mean about money. It has just been a most peculiar, difficult position for both Flora and myself. He did not even give the poor child an allowance. He would pay her bills, you know, and even that with a good deal of reluctance, and asking what she wanted all these fal-lals for. So like a man, but now I've forgotten what it was I was going to say. Oh, yes. Not a penny we could call our own, you know. Flora resented it. Yes, I must say she resented it, very strongly. Though devoted to her uncle, of course, but any girl would have resented it. Yes, I must say Roger had very strange ideas about money. He wouldn't even buy new face towels, though I told him the old ones were in holes. And then, proceeded Miss Ackroyd, with a sudden leap of highly characteristic of her conversation, to leave all that money, £1,000, fancy, £1,000, to that woman. What woman? That Russell woman. Something very queer about her. And so I've always said, but Roger wouldn't hear a word against her. Said she was a woman of great force of character, and that he admired and respected her. He was always going on about her rectitude and independence and moral worth. I think there's something fishy about her. She was certainly doing her best to marry Roger, but I soon put a stop to that. She's always hated me. Naturally, I saw through her. I began to wonder if there was any chance of stemming Mrs. Ackroyd's eloquence and getting away. Mr. Hammond provided the necessary diversion by coming up to say goodbye. I seized my chance and rose also. About the inquest, I said. Where would you prefer to be held? Here or at the Three Boars? Mrs. Ackroyd stared at me with a dropped jaw. The inquest? She asked, the picture of consternation. But surely there won't have to be an inquest. Mr. Hammond gave a dry little cough and murmured, Inevitable, under the circumstances, in 2 short little barks. But surely Dr. Shepherd can arrange. There are limits to my powers of arrangements, I said dryly. If his death was an accident, he was murdered, Mrs. Ackroyd, I said brutally. She gave a little cry. No theory of accident will hold water for a minute. Mrs. Ackroyd looked at me in distress. I had no patience with what I had thought was her silly fear of unpleasantness. If there's an inquest, I shan't have to answer questions and all that, shall I? She asked. I don't know what will be necessary, I answered. I imagine Mr. Raymond will take the brunt of it off you. He knows all the circumstances, and can give formal evidence of identification. The lawyer assented with a little bow. I don't really think there is anything to dread, Mrs. Ackroyd, he said. You will be spared all unpleasantness. Now, as to the question of money, have you all you need for the present? I mean, he added as she looked at him inquiringly, ready money, cash, you know. If not, I can arrange to let you have whatever you require. That ought to be all right, said Raymond, who was standing by. Mr. Ackroyd cashed a cheque for £100 yesterday. £100? Yes, for wages and other expenses due today. At the moment it is still intact. Where is this money? In his desk? No, he always kept his cash in his bedroom. In an old collar box, to be accurate. Funny idea, wasn't it? I think, said the lawyer, we ought to make sure the money is there before I leave. Certainly, agreed the secretary. I'll take you up now. Oh, I forgot. The door's locked. The inquiry from Parker elicited the information that Inspector Raglan was in the housekeeper's room, asking a few supplementary questions. A few minutes later, the inspector joined the party in the hall, bringing the key with him. He unlocked the door, and we passed into the lobby and up the small staircase. At the top of the stairs, the door into Ackroyd's bedroom stood open. Inside the room, it was dark. The curtains were drawn, and the bed was turned down just as it had been last night. The inspector drew the curtains, letting in the sunlight, and Geoffrey Raymond went to the top drawer of a rosewood bureau. He kept his money like that, in an unlocked drawer. Just fancy, commented the inspector. The secretary flushed a little. Mr. Ackroyd had perfect faith in the honesty of all of the servants, he said hotly. Oh, quite so, said the inspector hastily. Raymond opened the drawer, took out a round leather collar box from the back of it, and opening it, drew out a thick wallet. Here is the money, he said, taking out a fat roll of notes. You will find the 100 intact, I know, for Mr. Ackroyd put it in the collar box in my presence last night when he was dressing for dinner. And, of course, it has not been touched since. Mr. Hammond took the roll from him and counted it. He looked up sharply. £100, you said. But there is only 60 here. Raymond stared at him. Impossible, he cried, springing forward. Taking the notes from the other's hand, he counted them aloud. Mr. Hammond had been right. The total amounted to £60. But I can't understand it, said the secretary, bewildered. Poirot asked a question. You saw Mr. Ackroyd put this money away last night when he was dressing for dinner? You are sure he had not paid any of it already? I'm sure he didn't. He even said, I don't want to take £100 down to dinner with me. Too bulgy. Then the affair is very simple, remarked Poirot. Either he paid out that £40 sometime last evening, or else it has been stolen. That's the matter in a nutshell, agreed the inspector. He turned to Mrs. Ackroyd. Which of the servants would come in here yesterday evening? I suppose the housemaid would turn down the bed. Who is she? What do you know about her? She's not been here very long, said Mrs. Ackroyd, but she's a nice, ordinary country girl. I think we ought to clear this matter up, said the inspector. If Mr. Ackroyd paid that money away himself, it may have a bearing on the mystery of the crime. The other servants all right, as far as you know? Oh, I think so. Not missed anything before? No. None of them leaving or anything like that? The parlour-maid is leaving. When? She gave notice yesterday, I believe. To you? Oh, no, I have nothing to do with the servants. Miss Russell attends to all of the household matters. The inspector remained lost in thought for a minute or two. Then he nodded his head and remarked, I think I'd better have a word with Miss Russell, and I'll see this girl Dale as well. Poirot and I accompanied him to the housekeeper's room. Miss Russell received us with her usual sang-froid. Elsie Dale had been at Fernley 5 months. A nice girl, quick at her duties, and most respectable. Good references. The last girl in the world to take anything not belonging to her. What about the parlour-maid? She, too, was a most superior girl, very quiet and ladylike, an excellent worker. Then why is she leaving? Asked the inspector. Miss Russell pursed up her lips. It was none of my doing. I understand Mr. Ackroyd found fault with her yesterday afternoon. It was her duty to do the study, and she disarranged some of the papers on his desk, I believe. He was very annoyed about it, and she gave notice. At least, that's what I understood from her. But perhaps you'd like to see her for yourselves. The inspector assented. I had already noticed the girl when she was waiting on us at lunch. A tall girl, with a lot of brown hair rolled tightly away to the back of her neck, and very steady grey eyes. She came in answer to the housemaid's summons, and stood very straight with those same grey eyes fixed on us. You are Ursula Bourne? Asked the inspector. Yes, sir. I understand you are leaving. Yes, sir. Why is that? I disarranged some papers on Mr. Ackroyd's desk. He was very angry about it, and I said I had better leave. He told me to go as soon as possible. Were you in Mr. Ackroyd's bedroom at all last night? Tidying up or anything? No, sir. That is Elsie's work. I never went near that part of the house. I must tell you, my girl, that a large sum of money is missing from Mr. Ackroyd's room. At last I saw her roused. A wave of colour swept over her face. I know nothing about any money. If you think I took it, and that is why Mr. Ackroyd dismissed me, you are wrong. I am not accusing you of taking it, my girl, said the inspector. Don't flare up so. The girl looked at him coldly. You can search my things if you like, she said disdainfully, but you won't find anything. Poirot suddenly interposed. It was yesterday afternoon that Mr. Ackroyd dismissed you. Or you dismissed yourself, was it not? He asked. The girl nodded. How long did the interview last? The interview? Yes. The interview between you and Mr. Ackroyd in the study. I don't know. 20 minutes? Half an hour? Something like that. Not longer? Not longer than half an hour, certainly. Thank you, mademoiselle. I looked curiously at him. He was rearranging a few objects on the table, setting them straight with precise fingers. His eyes were shining. That'll do, said the inspector. Ursula Bourne disappeared. The inspector turned to Miss Russell. How long has she been here? Have you got a copy of the reference you had with her?" Without answering the first question, Miss Russell moved to an adjacent bureau, opened one of the drawers, and took out a handful of letters clipped together with a patent fastener. She selected one and handed it to the inspector. Said he. "Reads all right. Mrs. Ritter Folio, Marby Grange, Marby. Who's this woman?" "Quite good country people," said Miss Russell. "Well," said the inspector, handing it back, "let's have a look at the other one. Elsie Dale." Elsie Dale was a big, fair girl, with a pleasant but slightly stupid face. Damn, all right. She answered our questions readily enough, and showed much distress and concern at the loss of the money. "I don't think there's anything wrong with her," observed the inspector, after he had dismissed her. "What about Parker?" Miss Russell pursed her lips together and made no reply. I have a feeling there's something wrong about that man," the inspector continued thoughtfully. "The trouble is that I don't quite see when he got his opportunity. He'd be busy with his duties immediately after dinner, and he's got a pretty good alibi all through the evening. I know, for I've been devoting particular attention to it. Well, thank you very much, Miss Russell. We'll leave things as they are for the present. It's highly probable Mr. Ackroyd paid that money away himself." The housekeeper bade us a dry good afternoon, and we took our leave. I left the house with Poirot. "I wonder," I said, breaking silence, "what the papers the girl disarranged could have been for Ackroyd to have got into such a state about them. I wonder if there's any clue there to the mystery." "The secretary said there were no papers of particular importance on the desk," said Poirot quietly. "Yes, but," I paused, "it strikes you as odd that Ackroyd should have flown into a rage about so trivial a matter?" "Yes, it does, rather." "But was it a trivial matter?" "Of course," I admitted. "We don't know what those papers may have been, but Raymond certainly said—" "Leave Monsieur Raymond out of it for a minute. What did you think of that girl?" "Which girl? The parlour-maid?" "Yes, the parlour-maid. Ursula Bourne." "She seemed a nice girl," I said hesitatingly. Poirot repeated my words, but whereas I had laid a slight stress on the fourth word, he put it on the second. "She seemed a nice girl, yes." Then, after a minute's silence, he took something from his pocket and handed it to me. "See, my friend, I will show you something. Look there." The paper he had handed me was that compiled by the inspector, and given by him to Poirot that morning. Following the pointing finger, I saw a small cross marked in a pencil, opposite the name Ursula Bourne. "You may not have noticed it at the time, my good friend, but there was one more person on this list whose alibi had no kind of confirmation. Ursula Bourne." "You don't think—" "Dr. Shepherd, I dare to think anything. Ursula Bourne may have killed Mr. Ackroyd, but I confess I can see no motive for her doing so. Can you?" He looked at me very hard, so hard that I felt uncomfortable. "Can you?" he repeated. "No motive whatsoever," I said firmly. His gaze relaxed. He frowned and murmured to himself. "Since the blackmailer was a man, it follows that she cannot be the blackmailer, then." I coughed. "As far as that goes," I began doubtfully. He spun round on me. "What? What are you going to say?" "Nothing, only that, strictly speaking, Mrs. Farrar in her letter mentioned a person. She didn't actually specify a man, but we took it for granted, Ackroyd and I, that it was a man." Poirot did not seem to be listening to me. He was muttering to himself again. "But then, it is possible, after all. Yes, certainly it is possible, but then... I must rearrange my ideas. Method, order. Never have I needed them more. Everything must fit in its appointed place. Otherwise, I am on the wrong tack." He broke off and whirled round upon me again. Where's Marby? It's on the other side of Grantchester. How far away? Oh, 14 miles, perhaps. Would it be possible for you to go there? Tomorrow, say? Tomorrow? Let me see, that's Sunday? Yes, I could arrange it. What do you want me to do there? See this Mrs. Folliot. Folliot. Find out all you can about Ursula Bourne. Very well, but I don't care much for the job. It's not the time to make difficulties. A young man's life may hang on this. Poor Ralph, I said with a sigh. You believe him to be innocent, though? Poirot looked at me very gravely. Do you want to know the truth? Of course. Then you shall have it, my friend. Everything points to the assumption that he is guilty. What? I exclaimed. Poirot nodded. Yes, that stupid inspector, for he is stupid, has everything pointing his way. I seek for the truth, and the truth leads me every time to Ralph Patton. Motive, opportunity, means. But I will leave no stone unturned. I promised Mademoiselle Flora, and she was very sure. That little one, but very sure indeed. And that brings us to the end of Chapter 10, and there has, in fact, been some developments. There's suspicion and circumstance piling up against a lot of the characters that we've seen, and circumstances and coincidence as well. So, we'll have to see which way the wind blows next time. But this will be where we end for tonight. This has been very fun. I'm glad we chose this one. It's a nice change of pace from when we were reading Paradise Lost. It's nice, and it's not unserious, but it is intended to be entertaining, and it is living up to its intentions every bit of the way. A good mystery is always something to be enjoyed. And I will go back to the point that we made a little bit earlier. The differences that we see between Poirot and Sherlock Holmes are very interesting. They're two great detectives in fiction, but they have very similar but distinctly different methods. Whereas they both have a sort of eccentricity to them, but they go in different directions. Poirot is meant to seem sort of alien, different, removed, whereas Holmes is like the hyper-analytical, uncaring sort. But then they also have their own little assistants. We've got the Watson for Holmes, and we've got, in this case, the Doctor for Poirot. Given that Poirot is a recurring character for Agatha Christie's works, I would wager a guess that pretty much the narrator of each given book is the de facto assistant for Poirot. So we get a little bit of a different interaction with each kind. Unless the Doctor tends to be a recurring character as well, but that seems a little bit of a stretch for a small town like this. I could be wrong. Very well. I'm not sure how much of Agatha Christie's bibliography is available in the public domain. I know this is one of her earlier works, but not the first, obviously. But this is, I think, where she first introduced Poirot, if I'm remembering correctly. But she was active a fair bit longer than this, and this is written kind of right around the edge when things are falling into public domain. So we're in that awkward territory where things are not quite, probably every year a few more will fall in. Curse of 100-year copyright. Alright guys, it is a little after 10 here, so let's go ahead and call this an evening. We will be back tomorrow to continue with The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. We're just a little under halfway now. So there is lots of time yet for twists and turns, false trails to be laid, red herrings to be pulled out, and maybe some real clues to be sifted through and found piece by piece, if only to be identified. I have a feeling, given the Agatha Christie's reputation, that some real clues have already been laid out. We can see who's the real culprit if we can only identify and observe, and sift through the trash, so to speak. So, if you have any ideas of your own, maybe keep it to yourself. We're trying not to spoil anybody here. So, we'll enjoy this together as we continue. We've got about 20% or so through each of our readings so far, so we've probably got about another 3-ish until we finish. So we'll probably be calling it a wrap on, I'd expect, on Tuesday or so, which is a nice pacing on this. There we go, yep. Sometimes, when we were reading Sherlock, I would have an idea, and sometimes you'd be right, and sometimes you're way off base, and I'm way off base. So that's part of the fun of these, is trying to, like, have an idea of, ooh, that's suspicious, or ooh, that's obviously a bait. So, we'll see. We can still yap back and forth about it, but just don't go pulling up Wikipedia for us. Alright guys, let's go ahead and call this an evening. We will be back tomorrow at our normal time. Until then, thank you very much for joining us, and I look forward to our continued reading and discovery of Agatha Christie's The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. Good night.